Hi guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the Improvement Podcast. So today I'm going to touch on why you struggle to progress your lifts. First of all, quick update on myself as I usually do. So not much to touch on really, to be honest, and kind of repetition of last time. So I'm a bit heavier, a wee bit softer, but also a wee bit stronger, which is an important thing because that's what will build the muscle. So I had a devolume week last week, being one working a week of just doing one working set to failure per exercise, not taking any forced reps or half reps that aren't there or 50-50 reps, in other words, just so I can drop fatigue in order to be nice and fresh because I was feeling fatigued and I was feeling the negative effects of carrying a bit too much fatigue than I was after. And I'm in a good spot now after the devolume week. It definitely done its job, and I've got a holiday in 2 weeks' time to look forward to. Yes, we could have pushed on until the holiday and took a break there, but it would have been kind of pushing it a bit because it would have been 9 weeks without a deload. And for myself, I think it's not worth it pushing on because I had quite a few aches and pains and a few signs to pull back. So yeah, I think it was the right choice to do, although it's not really time to well for the holiday. But in terms of this episode, like I said, I'm going to touch on why you struggle to progress your lifts. But if you do enjoy the podcast, please feel free to subscribe, share it on your story, and leave a like, comment, rating, and review depending on what platform you're listening to it on. And drop me a message if you want to see any specific topics, etc. I greatly appreciate everyone who does tune in. So, getting into the episode, the common state mistakes I see people make that limit their progress are what I'm basically going to cover in this. First one being consistency. So, it might seem obvious, but some people can be like, "Oh, I'm not progressing. This is not going well, etc." But then when I ask them, "Are you missing your? Are you nailing every session? Are you missing sessions? If you are, that's that's why." Like full stop. And yeah, just don't don't miss sessions. To be honest, easy fix for that one. I appreciate obviously things come up in that, but if you're not training consistently, then improve your consistency and that will yield better results. Simple as that. If you are being consistent, then obviously I can move on to the next points that can potentially help you. But even outside the gym, it's good to have consistency, meaning just having routine and having things look pretty similar day to day because you can then measure its effectiveness. For example, you don't have to be perfect. Let's say you're just getting into the gym. Let's say you're trying to bulk and your approach is eat to get quite full but not absolutely stuffed after each meal, and you're slowly putting on weight, then you're doing something consistently that allows you to put on body weight. It doesn't matter if you're not tracking calories because you're putting on body weight. And let's say you're focusing on eating enough protein, that's okay as long as you're doing that consistently. If you're seeing progress from it, you know what you're doing, you know what's granting progress, so there's no really any problem. Uh, where the problem lies is if you're doing things different on a daily basis, and then if you aren't progressing, you can then it's hard to know why not. And you need to do something consistently to see if it's working or not. And let's say you are just focusing on eating to get slightly full after each meal and eating protein with each meal, just getting a protein source in. And let's say you stop progressing, you need to do something more effective than that. You need to change what you're currently doing. You need to change your current approach. And it could be moving from what you're currently doing to then, let's say, eating more calorie dense foods and eating to get slightly full, or being a bit more full, a bit closer to stuffed after each meal, or it could be adding in another meal. But you need to do something consistently to see if it's working. Same applies with your training, same applies with sleep. So just make sure you're consistent, like across the board. Try and have routine, be regimented, and then you can spot when things work, when things don't, and assess and change things accordingly. In terms of the training side of things, if you're already being consistent, training consistently, are you potentially like swapping movements weekly? If you are swapping movements, you're not getting the chance to get efficient at a movement pattern. And what I mean by this is if, let's say, you are wanting to progress, let's say your barbell back squat, but you're only doing it every third week. And the other weeks you're doing, let's say, front squats, and then the other week you're doing, let's say, the Smith machine squat, then you're not giving yourself the chance to get accustomed and efficient at the movement pattern of a barbell back squat. You're not getting the chance to get good at it, because when we repeat things frequently, we get efficient at the movement pattern, and then we can express our true strength on it. But if we aren't performing that movement pattern consistently, in this case being a barbell back squat, then we're not giving ourselves the chance to do so, to get efficient at it. And that's why we progress movements really fast at first when we first put movements in our program. So that's like, if let's say you start squatting or doing a movement for the first time, if it's flying up in terms of your progress, that will be why, because you've not done it. And well, yeah, you've not really done it. Whereas if you, let's say, do a movement week in, week out for ages, then that's why you get a bit, it gets a bit stale and you get a lack of progress from it. In terms of my next point, it's not making the most of your warm ups. So your warm ups in the gym isn't just something you do for the sake of it. It's a chance to drill good execution and work on areas to improve. For example, if, let's say, on squats, you're trying to target your quads, ideally you don't want to be pushing your hips back excessively to start the movement, because that's going to make it more glute and lower back dominant. That's going to work those muscles more than your quads. So in your warm ups, if, let's say, you're guilty for pushing your hips back to start it, you can then focus on breaking at the knees just before you break at the hips. And that will mean it's a more quad focused squat. So for example, that's what you can drill. And the reason we want to drill in our warm-ups is when you're doing your hard set, your working set, your top set, whatever you want to call it, it's hard to focus on doing a lot of things at once. It's hard to focus on training hard. It's hard to focus on, yeah, training hard while also working on execution. You can't focus on tons of different things at once. And if your intensity is really high, you can't train incredibly intense and think, oh, I'll keep my knees, keep my like back nice and straight, do this, do that. It's not going to happen. Like, you can't really focus on that much when you're training intense. So make sure you're drilling that in your warm up so it can be second nature, and you can be really efficient at the movement for the time you get to your top set. And things like the hack squat or like a leg press, like, I like using the warm up. Sometimes it's hard to like stop at the right time without bottoming the machine out. So that's a good time to basically do so, and be aware of like when the machine's about to bottom out or hit the safety, so that you can stop just in time. And in terms of like your warm ups, I guarantee somewhere in your training there's going to be room for improvement. There's going to be room to be better at certain lifts. Like, your execution is probably not perfect, to be honest. And the reason being is mine isn't perfect. I've been training for, not that I've trained for centuries, I've been training for like 5 years now. And I still send like form clips to my coach, and he's been coaching me for over 2 years. So that shows you something. You've always got room to improve, and when you stop having that mindset, you stop improving. Simple as that. So make sure you're trying to improve your execution and using your warm ups for that. And filming sets is a great way to make sure your execution's in a good spot, because the reason why you might not be progressing your lifts, uh, this kind of ties into your warm up, is because you might not be doing things that allow you to create the most stability and the most tightness. For example, if you're doing, let's say, a pressing movement, and you're not creating any force with your legs, you're not keeping your legs driven into the ground, you're not trying to push yourself up the bench to create tightness through your body, then there's an energy leak going on there. There's something happening that's not allowing you to give yourself enough stability to progress that movement, because the more stable we are, the more force we can produce, meaning the more stable we are, the more weight we can lift, and more weight for more reps means bigger muscles, to put it simple. So if we're not doing so, then we're not allowing ourselves to, yeah, perform as best as we possibly can. So make sure you're doing things that mean you're nice and tight and stable. And a good example of why we can't produce much force when we're unstable is, imagine trying to squat on a BOSU ball or leg press without the seat there. Are we gonna be able to produce that much force? No, because we aren't very stable at all. And in terms of my next point is your training intensity. How hard are you training? Are you keeping yourself accountable to training really hard by let's say having a training partner potentially to help push you, that can be a good one. Or are you constantly trying to challenge yourself and move forward and do hard things in the gym to help improve your intensity? Are you looking at your are you recording yourself and seeing how slow your last rep moved? Because if your last rep moved really quick, then you've probably got more in the tank, because rep speed is a good indicator of how hard we're training. If our last rep moves really fast, we've most likely got another in the tank. Whereas if our last rep is incredibly slow, then we most likely have not a lot more in the tank in terms of like reps. Yeah. And in terms of something else regarding warm ups, so when you are warming up, make sure you're tapering your reps down and you're not letting it affect your performance in a negative manner. And what I mean by this is during your warm up sets, make sure you're not doing, let's say you're doing a barbell bench press. We'll use 100 because it's a good number and an easy number to like work up in terms of warm ups with. If you're doing 20 kilos for 10 reps and 40 kilos for 10 reps and 60 kilos for 10 reps and 80 kilos for 10 reps, and then let's say you don't quite feel warm, you're doing 90 kilos for 10 reps, you're going to tire yourself out before you even get to your working set. You're going to be fatigued. You're going to limit your performance massively and not really get much from those sets, like from a muscle growth point of view. So, what that will lead to is more fatigue and less or poorer performance when it comes to your hard set. So instead, what to do when it comes to your warm ups is do, let's say, 20 kilos, so just the bar for 10 reps, and then you can do 40 kilos for 6 reps, 60 kilos for 2 reps, and then 80 kilos for 1 rep. And then you can do your hard set with 100 kilograms. And that's just an example. If you don't need that much warm up sets, you don't need to use them. And you won't need much warm up sets if, let's say, it's further in your session as well. For example, if you're doing your warm ups, or if you're warming up for your last exercise, you're not going to need as much warm ups for your first exercise, because you've already done like many sets in that session. So you've already got blood in that target muscle. Granted, it's a muscle group you've been training previously in that session, but I think you get the drift. You don't need to do the same amount of warm up. So if you don't need to do as much warm ups and you've got the skill nailed, you're accustomed to the movement, and you don't need to like practice or drill execution, then don't take unnecessary warm ups, because it's just wasting unnecessary energy that's not really going to give you much reward. In terms of the next thing I want to touch on, it's nutrition. So, with nutrition, again, like I commented on towards the start of the episode, is there a lack of consistency with your diet, specifically around training? And if so, then try and be more consistent. Simple as that. And in terms of what to look for in terms of eating around your session, what you ideally want to do is get if you're just starting out, don't overcomplicate it. Just try and get a balanced meal before and after. The reason being is we want protein so we don't get sore, so we recover effectively. We want carbohydrates because they are our main source of energy and can help produce a anabolic response, meaning it promotes muscle growth, having carbohydrates after training as well. As well as that, we want ideally a wee bit of fat before. You don't have to overcomplicate it or have a bottle of olive oil. Just try and have, if you want a number, 5 to 15 grams of fat, or 10 to 15 grams, just because it will slow the delay of carbohydrates being released. And we want carbohydrates throughout our whole session, not just at the start. So if, let's say, we just have some carbs that digest super fast before our session, and we've got a really long session, then we might like burn through them all and not have them towards the end of our session. And that's going to mean we might burn out and our performance might drop. And next is eating adequate protein and having like good hydration. So, are you having protein around your session, like I said, and are you drinking enough water? In terms of how much water is enough, do you feel thirsty? That's a good sign. Is your urine consistently a darker color? Then that's probably a sign you're dehydrated. Whereas if it's like a really like light pale yellow, then that's usually a sign you're hydrated effectively. So yeah, make sure hydration is on point before your session and just in general, really. And if you're not progressing your lifts, are you trying to bulk? if you've not bulked, then it might be something good to do unless you've got any serious reasons not to. But basically, if you're wanting to progress and build muscle and you're not in a surplus, then you're limiting your performance and your ability to build muscle, because we want those we want to have adequate protein and the energy available to build muscle. And think about, if, let's say, I told you, right, you've got a house, your house is currently a certain size, let's say a 3 bedroom house. You're wanting to build another bedroom on, but you aren't getting any more bricks to do so. Then it's going to be hard to build that house without, yes, you can't really build a house without, or you can't add an extension without adding more resources. You need those available resources available, if that makes sense. I kind of butchered that or not demonstration, that analogy. But yeah, basically, if you've got a house and you're trying to make it grow, get bigger, but you're not having enough like bricks available in terms of like food available, then it's not going to be able to extend. It's not going to be able to get bigger. And the same applies with yourself. If you aren't eating enough to grow, then you're not going to grow. Next up is sleep. So, are you consistently spending a decent period in bed sleeping? That's when you release things like growth hormone that help the growth and repair of muscle. That's when you recover effectively, in other words. And that's when you are in the best position to drop fatigue so you can perform well your next session. Sleep, like the better you can sleep, the better you'll grow. Simple as that. Better sleep, better performance equals bigger muscles. Simple as that. And if you aren't already consistently spending a decent period in bed sleeping, then there you are. That's what you need to do. And focus on quality too. So having a nice cool room, having a dark environment, having the same sleep wake time. Even if your life's not in the perfect position for you to do this, you can still focus on the quality, even if you are limited from a time point of view. And always, you can always make time as well. Like some people say, I don't have time. Like you do have time, you just don't value that area of your life enough to dedicate the time to it, if that makes sense. Like everyone's guilty for like sitting on their phone or that, or just procrastinating at times and doing things that just aren't necessary in their day. So, can you spare time from sitting on your phone and get more sleep? Most likely you can. If you look at your screen time on your phone in your settings, if you've got an iPhone, I guarantee you it is somewhat frightening and probably a bit more than you'd rather like it to be. So, that time you're spending on your phone, you could be spending sleeping or doing something else more productive or listening to more episodes of my podcast. Uh, and in terms of, yeah, the topics I've covered, if you want me to, let's say, if you've got any other like questions or concerns or want me to cover anything specifically, then just drop me a message. I can happily help, and I'll happily like take on board some suggestions in terms of episodes you'd like to see. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed this one and you found it valuable from like a progression point of view in terms of your training in the gym. So hope everyone has a great week or a great rest of your day and or a great weekend whenever you're listening to this. And thank you very much for listening.